All right, everybody, let's finish this up. Okay, so what we're going to do now is after we had mapped out what was going on in this, again, relatively complicated passage here, let's see if we can answer these questions. So now, just as a review, remember, our goal here is read the question stem, make a prediction as much as possible, and then eliminate whatever does not fit. So let's look at the first question. It says, question 8, the passage is primarily concerned with what? Okay, so let's just think about this. Again, looking at our notes, we were focusing on two different debates, women versus origins, and then paragraph 2 is differences between these different views, differences between these debates, paragraph 3, and then that the difference sort of faded. So it seems like, if I'm going to make a prediction, it seems like the main focus is we've got these two different views and we are exploring both differences and commonalities. Okay, so again, that's our gut sense of what we should be finding, and immediately eliminate anything that does not fit that. Now, your gut might be wrong, but 85% of the time plus, it's not. So go with that. So let's see what we can eliminate. All right, so question 8, let's see what we got here. Passage is primarily concerned with showing how historians who were engaged in a particular debate influenced historians engaged in another debate. Is that our main thought of, one side influencing another, historians? I don't think so. I think we can get rid of that one. Let's look down the list here. Explaining why two initially parallel, oops, sorry. I cannot see my pen. That's what's driving me nuts. There it is. Okay. Initially, didn't really make it much better, did it? Initially, parallel scholarly debates diverged in the 1980s. Okay, now again, be very careful here. We did mention that in the 1980s, in paragraph 4, it says we have this shift from, but was that the primary concern? Doesn't fit. That would be out. All right. What about C? Comparing two scholarly debates and, okay, so far so good, comparing the two debates, discussing their histories. That's possible. Let's flag that one. Because again, stage 1 is supposed to be what can we eliminate? Okay, so that's a possibility. Let's look at D. Contrasting the narrow focus of one with a somewhat broader focus of another. Again, a possibility. It's dealing with the differences between these two debates, and one, okay, so I'm going to flag that. What about E? Evaluating the relative merits of the approaches used by historians. Now, this is what's very important with these sorts of, questions here on the GRE and just, any sort of academic test in general. Be very careful about word choices. Were we actually focused on the approaches used by the historians? Nowhere in the text is that brought up. Like, you think of approaches, like, oh, were we, using statistics, and then one side was actually, using surveys, or, no, never mentioned it. That definitely is out. So, we're down to one of these two. Either it is C or D. And again, on the test, like we talked about, if you're down to two choices, that is awesome. Go with your gut. You're most likely going to be correct. But in this case, let's just, since it's me, let's narrow down a little bit further here. So the first part, C, we're comparing two debates and discussing their histories. That to me is a bit of a red flag. We're not really talking about their histories. We're talking about, if we look at our notes, we're talking about the differences between these two different debates, right? One is focusing on this, another's focusing on that. Then the final paragraph was talking about, well, then their differences faded. They have some sort of similarity. I think C is out. I think D makes sense because the key difference between these debates was that one, was more narrow or restrictive versus the other. And we have evidence for that. I'm sorry, I cannot see my pen. There it is. Oh, there it goes. Okay, I would go with D because narrow focus versus broader. Look at this. Remember, we were talking about, it says that with few exceptions, most of these were focusing on the white architects of racial slavery. In contrast, the women's historians were interested in the institution's ideologies, equally concerned with documenting women's experiences. So it's like one was just on, focusing on one topic, and the other was focusing on a broader topic, more than one thing. So that seems to be the correct answer there. Okay, let's look at 9. We'll kind of zip through this relatively quickly. I want to make this video somewhat short. We've got 3 questions here. Let's look at this one. It can be inferred that we bring up American slavery, American freedom in the second paragraph primarily in order to do what? So let's just read around that for a minute. So second paragraph was talking about the differences between these views. We ended up with women's, had this different focus here. The origins group was limited to slavery. Women, part B, women, they seem to have a new perspective on stuff where the origins just kind of faded. Well, let's look at this last thing. Let's see what we got. Second, just reading around this. Second, in contrast to the newness of the debate over the debate over race and slavery had lost some of its urgency with this publication, widely regarded as the last word on the subject. So it seems like this is brought up, if we make a prediction, this book is brought up as something that ended, finished, whatever the scholarship was on the origins debate. So, with that prediction, which answer can we go with? Substantiate a point about the methodology. That's actually a kind of a pet peeve of mine. That word is misused constantly. I'm sorry, I know. All right, I'm tamping it down. I will. But the takeaway here is we never brought up methodology in that passage. So that's out. We're not talking about that. Cite a major influence on those scholars who claim that racial prejudice. We didn't bring that up either. That's out. C. Show that some scholars who were engaged in the origins debate prior to the 1980s were interested. We didn't bring up the 1980s until paragraph 3. Actually, I think paragraph 4. Yeah, paragraph 4. So that's out. Just absolutely right there. That's not what we were discussing in line 27 in the second paragraph. Okay, so we're down to either D or E. Let's see what we got. Identify a reason for a difference. That sounds so far pretty good, right? Because that was what we were doing. We're contrasting, back to our notes, we're contrasting, these two different viewpoints. So that's possible. Let's look at E. Contrast the kind of work. Well, were we talking about the kind of work that they? No, we were not. That's out. It has to be D. This is the takeaway here, is that once you've made your notes, you're very strictly tied to whatever is being discussed in the actual question. So if we're talking about why do we bring up American slavery in the second paragraph, we are tied to that second paragraph. And if there's information that's brought up that's not there, it's wrong, just automatically. So our answer choice is 9. I mean, for 9 is D. All right, really quickly, we're getting long. Let's do the last 2. Passage suggests so not out and out states it, but we can infer it somehow. Which of the following about the women historians mentioned in the third paragraph? Well, let's look back at our notes here. Third paragraph. That one's talking about the difference between these debates. Women's, we made the note in purple here that they had a broader view compared to the origins of experience, talking about women's experience. And I can't even remember what these were. Oh, yeah. What is this? Oh, institutions and ideology. Yeah, all that stuff. But the point being, it was broader than what was going on with the origins. So if we look at this, all right, disputed certain claims regarding the status relative to women in England. That was never mentioned. That's out. Their approach to the study of women had been partly influenced by earlier studies, and there's another keyword, earlier studies published by some scholars. They didn't say that. That's out. Their work focused on the experiences of both white and African American. That's possible. Their approach resembled the approach in that they were interested in the experiences. Well, there's a keyword. We had that. Oops, where's my pen? We had that in our notes, so that's possible. To some extent, they concurred about the origin. No, that's clearly out. It's got to be one of those two. If we look back over it, I'll give you a moment. You can pause the video and just sort of read over this. I think what we've got when we bring up Wood and Mullins, or Wood and Black, yeah, of they made a contrast, right? There's exceptions to, the prevailing narrative. That's exactly what the women's debate did. So, I think we've got D. Nowhere, we can actually, if you look back over it, we can eliminate C. Nowhere do they talk about focusing on the experiences of both the white and the African American women. And again, just sort of double checking that. Let's look at this. Origins, it says, what do we talk about here? Although, in contrast, although women's historians were interested in the institution's ideologies contributing to this, they were equally concerned with documenting, as in the original debates, however, the origins debate, scholarship defined its women's historians focusing mainly on affluent white women. So that would for sure rule out point C. Okay, very quickly, let's do 11. According to the passage, so there's our key, is the idea that we're going to have something that will be explicitly stated in the passage. Historical studies of race and slavery in early America that were produced in the 1980s differed from studies prior in that the studies. Okay, but let's think about this. They're bringing up the 1980s a lot. 1980s. Where did we talk about that? That was paragraph 4. What do we say about this? In the 1980s, historians of race and slavery shifted attention to enslaved people, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's look at what the questions. Oh, A is got to be it. Just immediately. That just leaps out. Gave more attention to the experiences of enslaved women. It states it right there. In the 1980s, historians shifted their attention to enslaved people, thereby bringing enslaved women more prominently into view. We're done. Once you've found something that fits, don't even bother going through the rest of the answer choices. You found your answer. It's good. You're done. Okay. This went, again, rather long, but hopefully this was somewhat helpful, and I will continue this tomorrow.